just finished talking about proximity.
Correct.
So number 5 is no attempt to cover up. So what is your opinion about this case and whether or not Benjamin tried to cover up what had happened?
He definitely did not try to cover up. I heard the 911 phone call, and he admitted to this right away, recognizing that he had done this.
At any time did he tell you how many times he had stabbed his sister?
We didn't really go into discussion of how many times. What he said is he recalled stabbing and coming out of this dream, realizing he's stabbing and thinking maybe it's his sister, and he like realized that he's just stabbed his sister. It was a single stabbing that he recalled. But yet the evidence showed there were 2 thrusts of the knife, and he doesn't recall. His characterization was always a single thrust as he's coming out of this dream. And so he's amnestic to getting out of the bed, grabbing the knife, mobilizing over to by his sister, and then the first thrust, it's not part of his recollection.
So when you're in stage 3 sleep, slow wave sleep, are you dreaming?
As I pointed out earlier, there is some dream kind of content that's vague when someone's asked to describe what they recall. It's not vivid description like in a REM sleep. So there is some degree of dreaming, yes.
Okay. Number 6 is amnesia, and that's what we were just talking about. Do you have anything else to add to what you just said about amnesia or dreams?
Well, there's usually some level of amnesia. Usually it's complete or partial. So what's partial? Amnesia of the actual event. So you can have pockets of memory that can be there from the event. That's not exclusionary. So usually there would be no memory, but there can be some memory of part of the event.
If you know, what does a person do when they realize something's happened but they have no memory of it?
Objection would call for speculation.
He's an expert in neurology and sleep studies and sleep science, and I think he's qualified to answer that question.
So rule, you may answer.
You may answer.
So I want to make sure I understand the question. You said, what would be a normal response when someone has done a violent act without knowing that they did this and recognizing that they just did this?
Let me ask it differently.
Okay.
What is confabulation?
Confabulation is when you make up events to cover up, or someone's like malingering, or just they're trying to fake or get out of doing something.
Can confabulation be you trying to reconcile the situation you find yourself in with not remembering what happened?
Yeah, so we use medically confabulation typically like with alcoholics that can't remember, their memory goes bad, and so they'll fake and they'll make up things when you ask them questions, and they'll fill in the gaps by just making up things when asked.
So you're making up things based on what you find when you come to?
Well, yeah, it would fit.
Possibly?
Yes.
And then this slide is a summary of the 7 points we just went over. Is that correct?
Well, it's point number 7 that they break down. The episode may occur upon arising, typically in the first third of the night, and it may also occur when attempting to awaken the person. And this is sort of like just a review, but again, these are points that I wanted to individually address. So I do that, that there's no attempt to awaken him, or that we don't know of any attempts that anyone made to awaken him. But again, it's not exclusionary. It says may. Subject may be hard to awaken. Again, it's not exclusionary. We don't know that anyone did, because that could be the trigger. But in his case, I think it's probably the sleep apnea that could be the trigger. And the subject may resume going back to sleep afterwards, being very sleepy. My understanding is that when he got into the police car or later, he fell asleep, but it wasn't right after the event. But then again, that's not exclusionary. They may. I think with all the emotion going on, he was highly vigilant, and he was clearly on point during the 911 call. I wanted to see, was he showing any evidence of confusion? He was in disbelief and overly, appropriately upset, but also on point to carry out exactly what the 911 operator was telling him, to the point where he's doing CPR, keeping count. He's trying to do everything he can and says, don't let her die, don't let her. It was put tears in my eyes.
Okay, continue.
Immediately after regaining consciousness, the individual may experience confusion, which is what I just talked about, or horror. Well, in his case, he had, horror. But again, the quick resumption and not having lack of confusion, I have that other history from.
Non-responsive.
Question answer, please.
In regards to this slide, are we discussing E?
Yes, E.
Okay. And what is it that's important for the jury to know about E?
That there's a description of another parasomnic event when he was 13 with the donut, where he quickly reoriented. So that alone doesn't change. If I didn't have that quick orientation, but I had that parasomnia, it wouldn't change my conclusion, but it's one more piece of, he's already been witnessed to have a parasomnia and have a quick reorientation, which is not typical of what's described in the literature. Usually, not always, usually there can be a period of confusion. But I was able to feel more comfortable rectifying that by knowing that there was a previous event where he oriented, knew where he was in disbelief that he had gone up and ate this donut, and what have you. So it's a repetitive set of events.
So after you found this article that was published in 2024, did your opinion that you gave in 2022 change at all?
No.
And what is your opinion about the events that occurred on September 29th of 2021?
That it was a perfect storm of circumstances. One thing we didn't elaborate on was his illness prior to this.
Objection to non-responsive.
Sustain. Ask your
What
question.
would his illness prior to this, how would that affect this event?
He had a respiratory illness with some congestion that could, if anything, make his sleep apnea worse. His sleep cycle was way off. He was home from school. And then also the time of night being, he was sleep deprived. We don't have, there was characterization of his behaviors earlier, so we can assume he was to some degree sleep deprived. Had proximity of a weapon or a knife, and sleep apnea as a trigger. Family history of having abnormalities of arousal and parasomnias, and him himself having had parasomnias, and that is a trigger. And that I felt that this is within reasonable medical certainty that it was a parasomnia that occurred that night, that there was no pre-planned intent, and it's so out of context. And medically I can explain this, and it's really unfortunate.
Objection to non-responsive.
She's answering
My
the question.
opinion.
Whose opinion is it?
At a certain point, it starts deviating.
Okay.
Why don't you just continue asking questions to get that opinion out, please.
And what's the rest of your opinion?
Well, that this was an event was a parasomnia.
And then, oddly enough, you have a footnote in this article.
Yeah, so when I went through and looked at the articles that were referenced in this paper, actually there was an abstract of mine on parasomnia, as a different kind, on REM behavior disorder. That was one of the ones that came up on their literature search. But it didn't make the final cut. because it didn't have enough detail that they were looking for in order to be inclusive, and it was just the abstract from a presentation at the American Academy of Sleep Medicine's annual meeting. But yeah, there were 2 cases of using a gun as part of a parasomnia. And we didn't talk about overlap disorder, just to show you how this field evolves. There's REM.
Objection, non-responsive, and relevance.
So
No, that's a same question, please.
non-REM behavior disorder is completely different than what
You mean REM behavior disorder?
REM behavior disorder.
Well, you say that different. No, I'm going to differ on that. Let me explain why.
Okay, well, no, it has nothing
Okay.
to do with this case.
I don't think it does.
Okay, then let's just leave it there. Okay. Can you tell the jury, again, from the polysomnographs that were done, how long did it take Benjamin to fall asleep in those polysomnographs?
Objection to asked and answered.
You said it again, is there like, are you getting to another point where we need to hear it again?
Yes, Your Honor, but I'm happy to ask a different question.
Okay. I just don't want to have the same questions.
There are 2 different sleep studies.
Correct.
In one, it took him longer to fall asleep than in the other.
Correct.
And how long did it take him to fall asleep?
I think it was 7. You'd have to go back and look at it. I think.
Look at the slide.
Okay. So this was, which one was this? This is the second, well, the second one was very short. The first one was longer. The first one was maybe 17 minutes, I think. The second one, he fell asleep within 2 minutes of being told to fall asleep. And then he went into slow wave sleep and 3 sleep within 9 minutes. So that would be 11 minutes after the beginning of the study when they say lights out.
After you completed your report in 2022 and prior to your testifying today, did you discuss this case with someone else who is a
Well,
expert in sleep medicine?
obviously, I have colleagues and I talk about certain ones, but I think I wanted to, there was a particular neurologist who's very familiar with parasomnias, and I think I asked you, I want you to get another opinion to see what you think, just don't take my word. And so I did.
Objection, Your Honor, may we approach this group?
What do you make of this testimony and this defense? Hit us up on social media. Let us know what you think. Let's bring in our guest to discuss. We have criminal defense attorney and former lead prosecutor Bob Bianchi. Yes, we can talk about this expert and how cases are won or lost with experts, but I also want to talk about the mom and dad that are in the gallery on the other side of the bar behind these defense attorneys asking questions. We're going to hear from the mom today. We know she takes the stand because, remember, we're on that delay. But what does that say for this jury that's going to be ultimately deciding the case that the parents are testifying on behalf of the defense?
I think it says a lot. I mean, I think the optics of it, of course, is that they would want justice for their daughter if their son had killed them. I think they have very relevant testimony to provide with regard to this defense. I think it says to the jury that we understand that this was a tragic event. Our daughter is gone, but don't take our son as well because this was not intentional. So I think it's very powerful from that standpoint. And I think that this expert's very powerful. Something that struck me that I always love bringing out here on Court TV, because only you guys can do it this way, is what's going on in the mind of the lawyers right now. Now, this expert, and I'm talking about now the prosecutor in particular, I've been in this seat so many times. They're evaluating this expert. And here's what I'm thinking if I'm a prosecutor. This guy is dying to give more information. He is extremely knowledgeable. He is clearly a well-prepared, better prepared. I was surprised there should be better witness preparation. Direct examination got a little choppy, and he clearly wants to get more information out than this defense lawyer is bringing out. And the reason I bring all these pieces is because you have to be careful not to get into a cage with the expert bear. That's how I teach this to people in terms of cross-examining an expert. This guy knows his field. And if you get into that cage with that bear is going to tear you apart. If you got little things that you can poke them with a long stick, do it. Because if they open the door on cross-examination, you watch, trust me when I tell you this guy is going to unleash with a level of information that was choppy and couldn't get out on direct examination. So if I were a prosecutor, I would be saying, wow, I don't know if I'm going to go really hard with this guy.